MLB.com's Rock Kabako to break down today's 4 p.m. trade deadline. A lot of moves still to be made around baseball. Well, despite a loss to the Blue Jays, yesterday was one of the most eventful and encouraging days for the future of the Orioles franchise that we've seen in quite a while. The O's added 5 prospects via trade. They recalled 2 of the most exciting young players from their alternate site. They got 2 homers from rookie Ryan Mountcastle in the game. Let's start with the most impactful move made by Mike Iglesias and the Orioles front office yesterday. That would be the trade of veteran reliever Michael Gibbons to the Colorado Rockies. The former shortstop turned pitcher was a success story for the Orioles minor league development staff for years. He finished his Orioles career with a 3.32 ERA in 6 seasons. Coming back to Baltimore are 3 players: shortstop Terrin Vavra, first baseman / third baseman Tyler Nevin, both of whom immediately are slotted into the Orioles' top 30 prospect list, according to MLB Pipeline. Plus, the O's get a player to be named later. Now, this season, that could be any prospect not in the Rockies' 60-man player pool. Mike Iglesias spoke about the trade after yesterday's game.
Michael's an impact reliever, and he's somebody who has been an Oriole for so long. And as I told him today, he's going to be an Oriole for life. He's going to be part of this organization well after he retires. He's meant a lot to our organization on and off the field for a really long time, and we're going to miss him. Nevin and Vavra are they've been pretty high-profile guys since they were drafted. Both were high picks, both favorites of scouts. Both have enjoyed success in pro ball. And, I think Vavra is someone, we've been kind of accumulating infielders the last year or so, and he fits right in with that group and just gives us another really high-quality guy. He can play shortstop, really good second baseman, kind of a plus contact bat from the left side, really good control of the strike zone. We liked him out of the draft. Gamer style makeup, and he's coming to Bowie once he completes his intake, so we'll get a look at him here soon. And then Tyler Nevin's been a very attractive and very productive hitter since he signed in 2015. Really good up through the fall league last year, and had a very solid Double-A at age 22. Digging into his numbers and some of his batted ball data a little bit more from Double-A last year, we actually think he had some bad luck and could have been an even better season. He controls the strike zone really well. He's got a real pretty swing, very solid third base. I think it's fair to say that he's serviceable elsewhere, third base, corner outfield, but first base is probably his best position right now. And he's somebody that I would say in all likelihood, will be at Major League Spring Training next year, and probably pencils in at the moment as our starting first baseman in Norfolk next year. But we'll just have to see.
Now, the Gibbons trade was actually the second move Mike Iglesias pulled off yesterday. He dealt Tommy Malone to the Braves for 2 players to be named later. It was quite a return for a guy the O's signed to a minor league deal back in February. But Malone proved to be a worthwhile addition for the Orioles. He started on opening day at Fenway and finished his time in Baltimore with a 3.99 ERA in 6 starts. Here's Brandon Hyde on Tommy Malone before Sunday's game.
Tommy's a guy that gave us some really good starts, and a guy that was a class act on and off the field. Loved having him on the team. He's fantastic in our clubhouse, and a guy that gave innings for us out of the, in the rotation in a tough season, and threw strikes, hardly walked anybody, was able to change speeds, was able to navigate through good lineups, and happy for him and happy for Atlanta that I think that he's going to go into a good situation there, but it was really a pleasure to have him on our club in the short time we had him. I talked to Tommy. I told him I'd love to manage him again sometime, just because I really enjoyed having him, and I thought he was a real class act, and I think he enjoyed his time here too. He said a lot of really nice things about what's going on here, how he appreciated everybody here. He liked the team a lot, and so hopefully, in this small world we're living in, hopefully someday I'll be able to manage him again. But I would have liked to got to know him a little bit better. I like to see him pitch in a normal season, but this year is just a different one.
Now we're joined by MASNsports.com's Rock Kabako via Zoom, fresh from a workout, Rock, I believe. You have the people tune in to see the guns, so, I mean, we got to get a gun show.
All right, there we go. Okay. I was trying to hide that, but
I had to bring it out. So, Rock, let's talk about the two deals that were made yesterday before we get into the moves that the Orioles could make today. You talked about on the blog on MASNsports.com the fact that Michael Gibbons has been discussed in trade rumors for years now. And yesterday, Mike Elias said he's been getting calls about this guy for years. Why do you think yesterday was finally the right time to deal Michael Gibbons?
yeah, I can finally stop referring to him as a trade chip. That's something now the Rockies can do next year as he approaches free agency. But the time was right because they actually got an offer that made sense for them. I mean, they would have done this at the deadline last year if somebody like the Rockies had stepped up with what they ended up giving away. I mean, there's a couple prospects they really, really like and a player to be named later. Those offers just weren't out there previously. And, he's got another year of arbitration, making 3.2 whatever million. So he's just the salary's going to keep going up. It just made sense now to do it. And again, because they got that right offer and he was having a really good year, his value's up. I don't think it hurt him. Clearly it didn't, that he wasn't closing this year because he's dominant in the 7th and 8th innings. So why not let him be dominant and have him on the market, have teams say, great, here's a dominant setup, man. We can use that. There's a lot of value placed on relievers, as you know, maybe more so than starters with these contenders, instead of having them maybe struggle in the 9th inning and still try and convince teams to give you something for them. So the timing just made perfect sense. Of course, it punches a big hole in the bullpen for Brandon Hyde, who still is trying to stay in win now mode. But we know this is what happens. This is the suffering that goes on where you understand the rebuild process, but it's not like, now it's like, great, how do I cover the 7th or the 8th or even the 9th inning without a guy this valuable?
Yeah, I mean, Mike Elias said yesterday that around the trade deadline, teams like the Orioles that are rebuilding often have to struggle in the short term, kind of scramble to find guys to fill in for games and then hope that it works out over the long term. But Michael Gibbons has been around for 6 seasons. He was a very solid reliever in that bullpen back when the Orioles were making the playoffs, and he saw it through to the other side in the beginning of the Mike Elias regime. What kind of legacy do you think Michael Gibbons will leave the Orioles with? We heard Mike Elias say yesterday that he will be an Oriole for life. How do you think Michael Gibbons will leave this team?
Yeah, I think a lot of it's going to be his work off the field, which is very similar to Adam Jones and what he did for the community and, what he's done in Tampa, even though he was here. A very giving person. So I think that part is you really miss as well as what he contributes on the mound. Really good guy who wanted to make a difference, and he was able to do that, and he's going to continue that work wherever he goes, and certainly is going to continue to do it in his neighborhood back home in Tampa, which he already proved even though he was an Oriole. So I think a lot of it is that, and there aren't a lot of veteran leaders in this clubhouse, as you know, and he wasn't necessarily the biggest vocal guy, but he was somebody, especially in that bullpen unit, especially without Richard Blyer, and that players could go to. And now you lose him, but again, that's part of the rebuild, is that you peel away these veterans and you hope that whatever impact they made and whatever lessons they passed along will hold after they're gone. But I think a lot of Michael Gibbons, his value is what he did off the field, as well as the fact that, again, 7th and 8th inning, you look at his numbers and he was really, really good. And what a great decision it was to convert him from shortstop to reliever. He was a light hitting shortstop in the low minors, and we saw how that turned around his career.
Maybe the more surprising move made yesterday was the fact that Tommy Malone was dealt for 2 players to be named later. Guy who went from a minor league signing back in February to opening day starter and then dealt at the deadline. Were you surprised that the Orioles were able to get anything in return for Tommy Malone yesterday?
I think I'm a little surprised by the multiple players to be named later. I thought there would be 1, instead it's going to be 2 for a guy who was signed to a minor league deal while they were in spring training, that popular Oriole move that they make where, you can't really start doing roster projections till you actually get to Sarasota, because that's where they do a lot of their business. But I was a little surprised by the timing. but he was one of the chips, and sometimes it works out. It didn't work out with Wade LeBlanc, but the whole idea with Tommy Malone as well was that you sign this guy, minor league deal, not much of a financial risk, but there's upside. There's a chance for a reward if he pitches well. First of all, he's a veteran who can cover some innings. He had 2 quality starts for you in this bizarre season. And then you hope that he's good enough that besides helping you on the mound, he can help you in the rebuild because you can flip him. And I don't know if you're going to get like difference makers in return that really push the needle in the rebuild, but the fact you're getting a couple minor leaguers who aren't in the 60-man pool, from the, perhaps ends up, guys who can provide depth in the lower levels of the minors, for a guy who is a minor league signing that is not part of the rebuild and probably wasn't going to be back, that ends up working out great for Michael Elias. And again, he was hoping to do the same with LeBlanc, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. We saw what happened to Malone in his start, though, with the Braves. His debut did not really go well. I think it was like 7 runs and 2 1/3, but he's better than that. And he was really having a big year for them. The strikeouts, career high in the strikeouts per 9 innings, and he doesn't walk guys. He is a back end of the rotation swingman type, and I wasn't sure what you would get for someone like that. I think the Orioles, even without knowing the identity of those players, did pretty well there. So it did work out for them. I just thought that maybe a Gibbons or an Alex Cobb or someone like that would go before Tommy Malone. And instead, yesterday morning, while working out in the home gym, the news broke that Malone was going to the Braves.
Well, you just mentioned Alex Cobb there. Do you think that he's the most likely trade candidate to be dealt today by the Orioles?
I think it could be him. Miguel Castro's a possibility. The problem with Cobb is, financially, that's a hurdle because he's going to make about $15 million next year, plus the rest of whatever he's owed this year out of, I think it was 14. He has a limited no trade clause, 10 teams. You have to assume to go to a contender, he would waive that, but he has that right to turn it down. But money-wise, the Orioles would have to make that work. They would have to absorb a lot of it. And I think they're willing to do that. There was a lot of talk at the winter meetings a few years ago after his first season that they were willing to eat most of the contract in order to go ahead and move that money off the books and get something in return. So I'm sure they'd still be willing to do that, but it's still a little trickier than moving a guy who's making 1, 2, even 3 million right now, and is going to make a lot less than that next season. So the contract can be a hurdle, but teams are looking for starters. They can look at him as a guy who has a track record. It's pitching pretty well this year, even though he's not getting deep into games. Somebody you can plug in middle, back into the rotation, not a number one necessarily like he was projected here, but somebody that could help. But financially, that's going to be a hurdle. And Miguel Castro was a guy a lot of teams like, and his salary, what is he making? Like what he was set to make $1.05 million this year. That's what his contract was set at. He has 2 more years arbitration, so there's team control, but that salary is going to keep going up. They always get raises, and on a team in a rebuild, how much do you want to pay for a guy who's more of a 6th, 7th, 8th inning type? So, there's a lot of interest in him. If the right deal comes along, they'll go ahead and move him as well. Hanser Alberto, who goes from, waiver wire resident to trade chip because it's a crazy, crazy game. He's somebody as well. What he end up at like 1.6 or something like that, 1.65 as I check my notes. And he's got a couple more years arbitration eligibility. So how much do you want to pay a Hanser Alberto while you're rebuilding? So, and that's a guy that, is having a terrific year at the plate against right-handers as well, but especially rakes against lefties and versatile enough to play a couple positions. There's going to be some interest in him, but it's going to come down to, is it the right offer? If it isn't, they'll hold on to him. They'll revisit it in the off season. There is still going to be an off season, even if there aren't usual traditional winter meetings. I think there's going to be an off season, and then even the next year's deadline. But I think those are a couple guys. Tanner Scott's a curiosity because there's going to be interest in him, I'm sure, has been. But that's a guy under team control who has a plus fastball slider and could be like an Andrew Miller type for you. They may prefer to hold on to him. I don't think they're especially motivated right now to move Tanner Scott unless they're blown away by an offer. I mean, no one's untouchable, and then you go ahead and you do move him. But I think that's a guy they're more likely to hold on to.
Yeah, I think you're pretty excited, as are all beat reporters, that we may not be in a physical location for winter meetings this year. We actually don't have to hang around hotel lobbies, most likely, this December in Dallas or wherever it would be. But you mentioned a few guys that the Orioles could deal. One guy I want to get your thoughts on, Jose Iglesias. Do you think that he could be a potential trade piece today?
I think he could be if a team's out there that's convinced that he's durable enough to finish out the final month of the season. There's no doubt he's having a fantastic year at the plate, better than ever. And he's still a really good defender, though. Every time he has a misplayed shortstop, I'm like, typical all hit, no field Jose Iglesias. But teams know his defensive reputation. But if the only thing that would be the holdup would be if their team's like, look, this guy, he had the back issue at summer camp. Now he had the quad for quite a while that kept him out. They're still being careful with him. He's DHing some. He's not playing shortstop every day. And that could scare some teams away. The Orioles like having an option on them for next year. It's not like they have a middle infield like shortstop beating down the door. And Richie Barton lost some developmental time, obviously, with this season-ending injury. And there's no minor league season. So they may be more inclined to say, look, we'll revisit this in the offseason, but we have Jose Iglesias for another year, and we can always go ahead and revisit the deadline next year and see what the value is. But, if a team, again, steps up and says, look, we trust that he's healthy enough and we need a guy like that, and they make the right offer. The Orioles signed him thinking potential trade chip. So you go ahead and you pull the trigger on a trade like that, but I just don't know if they're going to get the right offer given the health issues he's had.
Rock, I appreciate the time. I'm sure you'll be working the phones all morning and afternoon, so we'll let you get back to that. Rock Kabako of MASNsports.com. Thanks so much for hopping on MASN All Access.
All right, my pleasure. Thanks.
You just can't forget about the MASN All Access podcast. Myself and Brendan Mortensen are your two hosts. We had Trey Mancini on the most recent episode, so what are you waiting for? Go listen to it on Spotify, SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. Watch it on the MASN Orioles YouTube account. Watch it on the MASN All Access Facebook page. Anywhere you get your podcasts, you can get the MASN All Access podcast, and we will have a fresh episode out for you tomorrow, breaking down this entire trade deadline, which again is at 4 p.m. today. So be sure you are locked into MASNsports.com, where Rock Kabako and Steve Molesky will have everything for you. And we will have everything for you as well on our MASN Orioles social channels. Thanks to Brendan Mortensen and Hannah Broder behind the scenes today. I'm Paul Mancano. Thank you so much for tuning in.